everybody. So thank you for coming to this event today. And so I want to start by saying we have live captioning and American Sign Language interpreting are available for this event. To turn captions on or off, click the CC Live Caption icon along the bottom of your window. You can also adjust the size of the font by clicking on the three dots at the bottom of your window that say More and selecting subtitle settings. Our sign language interpreter, Du Bois, and our captioner is Jessica, should appear as a panelist on your screen. If you experience any issues accessing the captions or interpreter, please message to all panelists in the chat. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that I am joining you today from the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone people. We are all joining this event from places around the world, and so I invite you to take a moment to reflect on the lands you are joining from, as well as your relationship to those lands and to the indigenous peoples who have and continue to inhabit them. Welcome to the Mentorship Spotlight, building an equitable and efficient lab. I am Kendall Nicholas, a neuroscience PhD student at the University of Pennsylvania, and I am one of the organizers of Black in Neuro Week. Before we start, I want to thank our generous conference sponsors, without which these events would not be possible. I hope you have been able to enjoy some of our programming today. We've had the mentorship workshop and outreach panel. If you are unable to attend any of these sessions, check out our YouTube page where all of our events from today and the rest of Black in Neuro Week are either available now or will be posted shortly. Additionally, if you want to share any highlights from what you've learned today on social media, please do so using the hashtag Black in Neuro Week 2021, hashtag BINW21, and hashtag Black and Neuro Mentors, where we are having wonderful conversation about what mentorship means to us. Today, we have the Williams Lab to run a roundtable discussion about what mentorship means to them and the keys to building a dream lab. The Williams Lab is led by Dr. Deanna Williams, an assistant professor at Johns Hopkins University, whose research aims to identify mechanisms by which HIV, drugs of abuse, and the therapies used to treat the virus damage the brain. We have Dr. Corey White, a postdoctoral fellow in the lab studying metabolic consequences of HIV infection in the brain using multiple animal models. And last but not least, we have Andrew Gossipul, an undergraduate in the lab studying how HIV infection affects lipid metabolism within the central nervous system of mice. We are so excited to hear this discussion on the role of membership in an equitable and efficient lab and how that is passed through different levels in the lab. If you have any question for our panelists, please use the Q&A function to ask them and your questions will be answered. We hope you enjoy this conversation and will allow them to take it from here on how they chose each other as mentees and mentors.
All right, thank you, Kendall, for that very kind introduction and also for the invitation to be here. We're all really, really excited and just happy to share some of the things we've learned along the way and some things that help make our lab work well. I think I'll let Corey and Andrew start with kind of why they joined the lab, and then I'll talk about some things from the mentoring perspective.
Yeah, of course. And I just want to second that. Thank you, everyone in Black and Neuro, for both inviting us for this event and for all of the hard work that you do in organizing such a wonderful week of events. So to start off with the first question, why we chose our particular mentor, in this case, like why I chose to join the Williams Lab, I really wanted to find a space that was a combination of excellent science and a space that was going to be very, very invested in myself, both in regards to my professional goals and myself as an entire person that could really respect like me as a person and want all of the success going forward for any endeavor that I do. So I'll let Andrew go forward and tell why he chose, and we can start bouncing back and forth a little more.
Yeah, so again, I'm really appreciative of the chance to be here. And the reason why I chose to join the Williams Lab is because I actually had a experience in a different lab where I felt as if um, it just wasn't conducive with what I was wanting to do, and they didn't value me as a person. And just after that experience, I really wanted to find a place where I felt more valued, and just having someone that understood as a undergrad that I needed time more so for classes, but also just more flexibility in my schedule for when things came up. And yeah, the Women's Lab provided that, and I'm very grateful for being a part of it.
I guess this is my time to give a big ups to both Corey and Andrew. I was very delighted when they both wanted to join the lab. Andrew is an incredible go-getter. I didn't meet him. He actually cold called, emailed me because I had interviewed a student who was a friend of his for the graduate program here at Hopkins. And I guess she enjoyed our interview and spoke to Andrew about the interaction. And he wanted to talk about opportunities to do research. However, this was just before I think COVID happened in his sophomore year. And we were like, oh, this is great. We're going to, let you join the lab. And it kept getting put off and kept putting off. And then Hopkins wouldn't let undergrads come to the lab because of occupancy. And finally, he was able to come this summer, be remote, and he's going to start in the fall in person. And I just love the fact that he kept following up throughout all of it, expressing his interest in the lab. He was coming to lab meetings even before he was officially in the lab, wanting to read papers, and was just really invested. And so that showed to me that he was really interested and motivated. And I thought that was a really good attribute to kind of have. Corey has very similar go-getter attributes, which is what I really enjoyed about him and want him to join the lab. He was really interested in expanding his skill set to a disease context. So for his PhD, he had worked on fatty acid oxidation, lipid metabolism in the brain under normal states, but he was trying to see what disease context it might fit in. And I knew of some importance of this in the brain during HIV, but I really wasn't fully well versed. So we had some conversations. I knew of him already through a mentoring program that I started at Hopkins as a postdoc, along with two other fellows. And I was his mentor in that program. And over the years, he just impressed me with his tenacity, his hard work, his motivation. And it just seemed like a really, really good fit. Also, Corey received a F99 K00 D-SPAN award, and we spent a lot of time working on that together as a graduate student. And it worked out well that he was able to receive it and fund it through his great merits and attributes. And it seemed to be a good fit. So that's why I chose to have both of them in the lab. They're really outstanding, hardworking people. And I think it works really well, our relationship together.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that. Just in regard to, we spoke a lot about value as a person. And this speaks to like our professional goals, like sort of like what we want to accomplish. And bridging that with a lot of the investment that we put in each other as a lab to succeed. And you mentioned the F99K00 D-SPAN and all the work that was put in, like really before I was officially in the lab. And sort of the work that was done, not only for me, but as a lab, we've hosted like grant writing workshops to where we've very like organized like months out, sort of what applications people wanted to apply to, and like detailing the components of a grant and what like we needed to get done over time. And as an undergrad, like directly like reporting to me, like I've tried to model that with Andrew. Like he's actually applying to a number of different applications like coming up this fall. And I want to make sure that like we have like a detailed plan, that we sort of knew what each other's like expectations were going into the actual fall, and to make sure that it wouldn't be too much of a burden, like according to his class schedule, and to make sure that we could do a lot of the things over the summer, just knowing his class schedule, knowing that he's going to be more in person, and being very mindful of the other obligations that he has.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I make it a point to really kind of understand what everyone's goals are and to push them to kind of dream bigger if I feel like they're not living up to their full potential of what they're thinking they want to do. And so a lot of that is in our weekly meetings that I have one-on-one with everybody in the lab. Because Corey's also mentoring Andrew, we have a meeting for all three of us, which I think is key. So we don't have any confusion and misunderstanding. I know, and think back to my graduate school days when I had co-mentors, how frustrating it was for one mentor to say, do this, others said, do that, and then you didn't know what to do, or they didn't remember the conversation. So I think it's key for all three of us to meet on a regular basis. In these meetings, we talk about not just their experiments and how their data are, but what they want to get out, what they want to accomplish. So a good example is um, now that COVID is hopefully to some extent dwindling, although maybe not with different variants, we're thinking about the lab beginning to go back to conferences again. And so I make a point with every single person to discuss the meetings that we're going to all go to as a lab, like Society for Neuroscience, but then also context specific uh, conferences depending upon each individual's projects. Now that requires coordination. If you're going to submit an abstract for a poster, and like for Andrew, we've been doing a lot of backtracking, being very mindful of the fact that he is an undergrad, that he is taking full workload over the summer, and he's working a job in addition to this. And so we really, really are mindful of the amount of time it takes such that he can accomplish what he wants to accomplish, but also thinking about his well-being. So he's not overburdening himself to try to accomplish things, but at the expense, excuse me, of his sleep or his joy or his happiness.
Yeah, and I really do think that both Corey and Yana do a really fantastic job of pushing me to um, reach my goals, and honestly, just they've helped me a lot to kind of understand what my goals are in a sense. Like coming in, I honestly was not sure, what direction I wanted to take with doing research. I thought the research was very interesting. I wanted to be a part of it, but as far as afterwards, I just wasn't really confident in the idea of, applying to grad school or um, going to conferences about the research. It's all very new to me, and they do a very great job of just, mentioning all of these potential things that I can do and pushing me, but again, not too hard to where I feel overwhelmed about it, but just always reminding me and, saying like, you can do this if you really want to. And I think that has just helped so much in the past few months with, understanding my goals more for the future. And yeah, it's super awesome.
And I think that's a really good point, Andrew. I think it's important to keep in mind that not everyone knows like what their path is going to be. That's the whole point of training. And that's the point of what a mentor is supposed to help you think of. So when new people come to the lab, we have like a very loose plan of I might like these things, or I absolutely don't want to do any of these things. And then we just kind of think of opportunities and ways that they can enrich their experiences to kind of narrow those down. It's really important for me to think about people's either professional goals, what they want to do like in a career after this, so I can mentor them accordingly. If someone wants to go into tech transfer, I'm going to want them to, of course, do well and excel and publish and all those things, but I'm not going to want the same magnitude of papers or expect that as someone that wants to go into academia. I may not push them as much to have 5 independent projects when that's not helping them. What's going to help them is them going to do an internship that's going to give them the skills they need that are going to be applicable to their next field. And if you do want to go to academia, let's say, I want to encourage you to go do workshops and teaching you how to manage a lab or grant write or any of those things that are going to give you extra skills that will help you later on. And when thinking about someone who just loves research like I did when I came, I was very naive. I didn't know what I wanted to do in grad school. I just knew I liked science and I was good at it. I like to focus on people's confidence. And so for Andrew, we spent a lot of time making him aware of the fact that you are capable, like you're actually really awesome. And we give him like little tasks to build the confidence. And then rather than us just saying it, he sees like, okay, actually, I am very capable and I'm very confident. For instance, he's giving a lab meeting, his first lab meeting in the next few weeks. And we tasked him with, making a presentation, presenting it to us first, so we can iron out the kinks, and just help him prepare so he's not thrown to the sharks, so to speak. And he came very well prepared, like did an outstanding job. We reorganized some slides. And the purpose of this was to prepare him, not just for lab meeting, but also for an abstract he's going to submit to ABRACAMS. Before this, he was like super nervous, and maybe I'm overstating, but I think you were super nervous about the abstract. And I think after the lab meeting, you're like, actually, like I'm very capable of this. I put this together, and now I have the skills I need for the next step. And I think that's a part of confidence building, which is really, really key in succeeding. You can have all the skills, I think, but if you don't always feel like you're capable or have a place in the space, it can be much harder.
And before we get to the question, there was another point I wanted to sort of tag along, brought on by something Andrew mentioned about how he's sort of shaping his like scientific identity and like what he wants to do professionally. And for me, this was very true. It's like, and this is something like I say a lot, it's like you don't always know what you don't know. And I think that as a lab, we do a really good job of sharing opportunities and sharing like these things that are available to apply to, or these conferences that are available to like go to, and sort of the different things and different skills we can learn and pick up along the way that we might not have been aware of.
And I see there was a question in the chat
Right.
about anything that helped mold my mentorship style. I'll let Corey speak for himself, but I know for me, I was very fortunate to have outstanding mentorship doing both graduate school and during my postdoc. They were very different experiences, though. My graduate mentor was very focused on taking graduate students and making them colleagues. So, despite your background, confidence, things of that nature, she was very much focused upon challenging you, even when you didn't think you can get things done, such that you would accomplish them and build your confidence step by step. So, I definitely take that with me. She also let people have a lot of independence early on. Of course, in your second year, third year, maybe not so much, but as you progressed, she really let you lead your experiments. And if they failed, they failed, but she was there to support you. And I keep that with me as well. My postdoc mentor was also outstanding, but she was key in pushing me to think about what I needed to do to kind of have a research program for my lab. So it helped me think about how I'm going to help trainees think about taking that next step. I also have kind of been honed by seeing other colleagues and friends who maybe didn't have good mentors. And I saw people who were more talented than me, way smarter than me, who had so much potential, and they just kind of lost their love for science due to toxic labs or bad mentors. And it made me very passionate about making sure that I do the best I can to be the best mentor for each individual person. So I take a lot of effort to, see different people's learning styles so I can communicate the way that their brain works to get the point across. And if there's miscommunications, I really think back on what I did or what I can do better to minimize that from happening in the future. So we have a lot of communication, I think. And I just want people to thrive, and I really want to support them as best I can. It's key for me, I think, to not let people be clones of myself, but to encourage them to think about what they came here for that interests them and prepare them for that. My goal is to let you, if you're a PhD student, get your degree so you can get your next job. If you're a postdoc, hone your skills so you can get your next job. You doing my projects or my grants is, of course, important. You getting papers for the grants is important, but it's equally important that I give back to you and think about what you need to get to your next steps. And I try to integrate that into everything that I do.
For me, it's pretty similar. It's a combination of the experience that I liked and I did not like from previous mentors, as well as the things that I observed that I liked and didn't like from my friends and colleagues from mentors that they've had. And really just seeing like, if I had the perfect mentor possible, like what would I want to be for someone? Like what would I have wanted? And even for what I wanted, I might have to tailor that for someone else. I might just have that vision for myself, but it might not be perfect for someone else even afterwards. So it's sort of taking that, what I see as a paradigm is like understanding of an individual and then being mindful of their professional goals and things too, and then trying to shape that for what their needs are once I can communicate that with them. And along with that, if there's ever something that I just can't give them, trying to figure out the resources of like where they can receive that from.
I also see a question in the Q&A asking about tips for starting the conversation with your PI, kind of setting those expectations when joining a new lab as a postdoc. So I encourage you to be bold and be very clear in what you want and what you need. I think a lot of times graduate students or newly graduated graduate students feel a little apprehensive about kind of being too forthcoming, but I think that's a detriment. Again, your goal is for you to get what you need out of this. And so if you can't communicate that, you're setting yourself up to not do as best as you can. So be bold. What do you need? Do you need a travel allowance? Ask for it. Everyone in my lab that asks gets funding to move to come to the lab because I know the struggle of not having enough money to relocate. If you're thinking about applying for grants or fellowships, communicate that. That's really key because that mentor needs to be aware of the fact that you're looking for these opportunities. And also they need to know that they're going to have to write you letters of recommendation. So they need to know that. If you want to learn how to write papers better, communicate that. Maybe that PI likes to write all the papers in their lab. And if that's the case, it's not going to help you get that skill set. I also think it's key if you're interested in alternative, well, so-called alternative careers outside of academia, communicate that so they can be aware of the fact that you are going to pursue those interests. You're going to do an internship or things like that. And if they're not receptive, it'll be very obvious early on. And then you can avoid what could be a negative mentoring interaction. When I for my postdoc, I was very clear on my timeline. I wanted to be there for 2 years, max 3. I wanted to have independence because I wanted to be a PI, and I needed to have the time and space to do my own projects. So I told my PI I was going to give you 2 papers, 1 per year. After that, I'm doing my own thing. Thankfully, she was very okay with that. It worked out well. I didn't say it so boldly, but I think you have to really communicate that upfront. Don't be shy in the interview. Ask for what the salary is. If it's not enough, be clear on that. When I started my postdoc, the nursing minimum was, I think, 42,000, and that was not enough for me to live on. I communicated this and I told her, like, I'm not choosing between paying for a pair of jeans and food for the week. So I need more. And she found some more. Now, that confidence came from a mentor who advised me to communicate this. And she also put the bug in her ear. So it wasn't all me. But you have to really be able to advocate for yourself so you can see if that person is going to align with what your needs are.
And in addition for being able to advocate for yourself, I think it's also very, very great to have mentors that advocate for you. And that will sort of be that second line if there's any conflict needs to be mediated, like within the space that you're in, that will sort of like whisper your name, like at conferences to people, that sort of like put a bug to like watch out if like you're perhaps like a grad student that's like looking for a postdoc. And just having that extra like advocacy and sponsorship is also well appreciated and key for just feeling like really supported.
If we can, I wanted to switch a little bit topic. We talk a lot about career and professional goals, which are really key. But another really important aspect of mentorship is thinking about people as people, kind of valuing someone for their whole person, everything they bring to the table, and thinking about their well-being, mental health checks, things like that. So I wanted to let Andrew have the space to be able to speak about his ideas on that, and then Corey, and then I'll come in last, if that's okay.
Yeah, so like I had mentioned at the beginning, I had this one experience when I was first looking to do research where essentially the PI of the lab sort of made it seem like it was like a, not really what can I do for you, but here's what I'm like, I can do for you. It was like very, almost like an advertisement you see where it's like, this is what you could do if you join my lab. So here's why you should join. But, just when I would ask for help in the project, because a lot of it was stuff I had not like I had no idea what I was doing. Was all new content for me. I've never done research before. But she made it very hard to ask her for help because she would talk down to you when you would ask for help. So I left after 2 days of being there. Yeah, it was very, very quick because it, I just did not like how I was being treated there. And it honestly put a really bad taste in my mouth as to pursuing research further because I'm like, is this how it's always going to be with every PI do research for? But after joining like Diana's lab, it was completely like 180 switch. Like, she's very understanding. Like she mentioned, I do work full times. I work at nights, and I am taking classes right now. And just sort of having someone understand, what you're going through in life is very it's super helpful when they're understanding because they're able to take that and I guess sort of be like, I get that. And for what you are doing and what you are accomplishing with all of that going on, it's very admirable, I guess. And, Corey and Dion are very, they always remind me, like you're doing a good job. And of course they don't, mention like given the circumstances, it's always just, you're doing a good job. And I think an important part of that too is just making people aware of what you are going through. It's sometimes, I don't know. I know for me, it's hard to sometimes tell them like, hey, this is going on. So I don't know. I'm the kind of, I don't like letting people down if I feel like we set an expectation, but Deanna always says, life happens. So yeah, just, they make me, both of them make me feel very comfortable to share, like, if something does happen, something might have to get pushed back, whether it's a deadline or whatnot. And despite, not being able to meet that expectation, it doesn't feel as big as a loss because they're very understanding about it and are willing to work with me towards a solution. Yeah, it's just very, like, I know I use awesome a lot, but it's super awesome just, having people that understand that like life is not the same for everyone.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, Andrew. And that is really powerful to be able to just say no to a bad situation like that very quickly. So
In
that's
2
very
days.
commendable. Yes.
Yeah, leave bad situations. It's not healthy.
It's not worth it. Yeah, definitely for me, that flexibility and just like understanding, especially when personal like family situations are going to like are very well appreciated. I know initially like I had this internal deadline for myself of like completing my the second half of the D-SPAN application, like the K00, like a couple months earlier, but there were like just family circumstances and things there where that initial deadline wasn't able to be met. And like Diana's very understanding as far as pushing that like later for a couple of months. And I know that in other circumstances that might not have been the case. And even going to some like previous experiences that wasn't the case. So that is well appreciated for being able to see that people are whole, that there are family circumstances happening, that people have life circumstances, people aren't always physically well, and might need time off just physically or just psychologically, might need time away just to recuperate. And that's always been very much so well appreciated. And that's something that I try to model and pay forward.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, life really does happen. People are people, and they bring all of who they are to the table. So if things in other areas of your life aren't going well, how can you be prepared to be the best scientist you can be? And then I guess on the other hand, science isn't everything. Like you have to handle your business. And it's impossible to kind of, and it's not even always important to meet the deadline. Just drop it. Like the conference will come again next year, or pushing it back to the next cycle is not a big deal. So some examples are we had a postbac student in a prep program from Puerto Rico, and he was here when the hurricanes happened. And I was like, are you okay? Like, is your family okay? Like, don't worry about lab because you may have lost everyone you loved in the world. Like, lab is so meaningless in comparison in this moment. Or we had a student at the beginning of COVID before we kind of had like our shutdown policies. There was a lot of gray area, like, do we come into lab? Do we not? And some people were really, really afraid and like to the point, I'm not a psychologist, so I can't say paranoia, but like very much concerned about transmission. And I was like, if you don't feel safe, do not come in. It is not up to me to tell you to work if you're afraid that you're going to get this thing that we don't even know anything about. And so by the time Hopkins agreed for the shutdown, my lab was already home. At the time, I was also pregnant, and I was like, I'm not coming in because I don't know what's going on, and I'm not playing those games with my baby, so I'm not here either. So if I'm not in lab, how can I expect you to come into lab? Or then I guess even like during the midst of COVID, I was very mindful of thinking about keeping the lab like collegiality and like family feeling intact, despite the fact that we'd hire all new people who I'd never met in person, like ever. And so I sent a lot of emails like checking in, like, what can I do to make the lab feel more cohesive? Are you like stuck alone in the apartment by yourself? Can I do something for you? Like, how are your friends? How are your family members? Have your people lost jobs? Like, are you okay? And then like for the holidays, bought people. So as an aside, our favorite lab snack are these gummy bears because they're really, really good. Anyway, so I bought people 5-pound bags of these gummy bears. I mailed them to everyone's house. I mailed everyone Uno cards because it's my family's unofficial favorite game, next to spades, of course. And so like we played Uno over Zoom and like bet gummy bears, and we had the best time. And it was really key because it was a really hard year, and we just needed to like laugh and have a good time. And then conversely, like when things are bad, we don't just gloss over it. I take the time to make sure that we discuss that. So during all the police brutality that's been happening in the last few years, that's been very public, we have had lab meetings where it's like, how are you this week? That's the first thing we ask. Not how are your experiments? Not what data did you get? How are you? And very real talks like, I'm really bad. Like, this is going on. This is going on. It feels like one killing after the next, and I'm not in a good space. What can we do? Or if I can't do anything, do you want me to just listen to you? It's a place for me to also vent and share those things too, and talk about maybe some microaggressions that I'm experiencing at work. I vent a lot to the lab. And I think that's really key so people are aware of the inner workings of how things happen and strategies they can use to kind of feel better in a place where you're often overlooked, underappreciated. People don't necessarily see your contributions as being equal as theirs. And so we have very real talks about how that impacts me, how I overcome it. And I'm hoping it's equipping them to deal with those things in the future.
I think it's very, very appreciate just being in such a space where we are this microcosm where we don't necessarily have to deal with these microaggressions and things with each other. We're very mindful of the people that they contribute very well to our like lab environment, to where it is very much so a safe space. I think there's something in the Q&A.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I don't know if everyone can see it. So for prospective lab or PhD applicants, do you have advice for lab and mentor matching? I do not always know what to look out nor what questions to ask. I think this sort of feeds back into like the statement, you don't always know what you don't know. I think that things like this are a good place to sort of see like what people value as mentors. I would also encourage you to reach out to like some more senior graduate students at your institution and reach, or a professor level PhD applicants. for applicants maybe. So maybe reach out to graduate students that are in the labs like you're interested in, just to learn more about that space and that environment. If you're already like in a graduate program, it's just good generally to learn what to look out for a mentor in general, by talking to some of the graduate students and postdocs, especially since they're very close to where you are in your training, and are really like thinking about those insights like actively. I don't know, Andrew, if you have any comments there as well, as someone that's about to apply for PhD programs.
I guess I don't know about like, I guess joining a perspective lab as a PhD student, but I know like for me, just when, again, looking for labs, I guess definitely taking advice from people, kind of like what Corey said, like reaching out. Because I know, when my friend who talked to Deanna during our interview, was talking to me about her, she it was someone I trusted a lot. So, just hearing like word of mouth from someone I know, or, someone that's met in person with this person already, knowing what they are like in a conversation even, I think that's just super helpful, even if it is a small aspect of it. Just knowing that that person is a person, and like, like can hold a conversation and sound, yeah, just that's, I guess, my aspect. I don't know if that was helpful, but like, just, yeah.
No, that's key, Andrew. I mean, it's really important to have someone that's just human. Like, they're a great scientist, but can you talk to them about anything that's not science, like at all? I think that's really important because you're going to be living with this person for a long time. Like, and you're going to see them more than, almost anybody. So you really have to see if you can find any kind of connections. The advice I always give people thinking about prospective labs is to really talk to the current lab members and see if the PI let you talk to them in their absence. Even better, if the PI will give you the names of their formal lab members. That's really key because if people left and still say good things about them, like that's a really good sign. Also, I tell people to think about the lab holistically, not just the science. Because I remember being a first year student, I had these particular interests and I wanted to go to labs that worked on just that thing. And it can be really exciting, like cutting edge science, but it can be terrible mentor or someone who's never available or really mean people in the lab. So, what good is it having the most exciting top of the line science if you're in this really bad environment? And so I'd say really feel those things out during your rotations, talk to your peers in your class and the current lab members, and feel for yourself if you can work there. Find people whose work is really interesting to you. And if you're kind of stuck between someone whose work is kind of interesting, but a fantastic environment, or extra interesting in a bad environment, pick the kind of interesting lab because you're never going to work on what you're working on in your PhD ever again, whether you go for a postdoc, industry, any other career. And so it's more important to learn how to be a scientist, to think as a scientist, to get the skills you need, to have someone value as a human being and learn how to do experiments, then to work on the top of a line project that's super interesting to you. Also, projects fail, and you can come in on a project and leave working on something completely different. So never go for just a project. Think bigger about it holistically so you can really try to minimize the risk of not having a supportive mentor or a good lab environment.
I see a couple other questions in the Q&A, so I can go ahead and read the next one. So it says your lab's too good. We are true. We often say we're the best lab. I'm putting that out for all of Black and Neuro. So it says I'm a little traumatized by labs saying they're like family because I fear being stuck in a close-knit toxic group. Do you have any suggestions for working in toxic environments? If you can, get out. If you truly are stuck at the end and there's no way out and you just have to push through it, I would I would very much so recommend for you to find other avenues and other support groups of things that are going to fulfill you and give you the gaps in support that you need. So if from that group or things, if you aren't getting the support professionally, reach out, find other mentors that can be other supporters, that can be other advocates for you, that can really meet that gap. If you aren't being invested in emotionally, like see if you can find other ways there where you aren't getting that support from your PI. Try to reach out and see if there are ways you can brainstorm either advocating for yourself within that space. Because if there's really no way out, you have to find ways to really fulfill yourself in order to maintain and to make it through successfully.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that I had never considered before. You're right. Families can be toxic, right? And just because you say it's family does not mean it's good. So maybe think about like when you hear that, asking like, well, what do you mean about family? For us being family oriented, it's about thinking about the person as a whole, like really trying to make sure that we just genuinely like each other. I don't let anyone come to the lab if there's not full consensus. I want to make sure that they're going to fit in well, that we're going to enjoy them. And that doesn't have to mean the same personality type. We have introverts, we have extroverts, we have people like all different kinds of stuff, but you kind of share the same approach that we have. You have the same considerations. You want to work, equally hard as everyone else. Those kinds of things are really important. And I want to make sure that our lab environment is maintained by really making everyone feel they have a voice. I wouldn't, if I think someone is the most outstanding candidate and someone in the lab who I really trust their opinion says, actually, when I spoke to them, I got this vibe, I would try to fill it out. I wouldn't just say no right away, but I want to kind of dig deeper as to why they may feel that way and, with that very, very heavily. But you're right, families can indeed be toxic, and we don't want that like negative space, quote unquote, suffer because your family is sick through it. That's something to be very wary of.
See, Andrew, is there anything you'd like to add to that one?
Um, I mean, again, I guess it's more of a grad student situation, but I know my situation, like going off of what I said, just leave because there is someone out there that a PI that will care and will be more understanding, I'm sure. So, I mean, again, speaking from experience, I found that. So I would say just get out if you can.
And along that line, there's a question that just came up if I can address it now because it's related. The Q&A about how to leave a lab and make sure you still have a job, pretty much. How do you still have the next lab to go to? Um, I'd say, I haven't done this, but I'd say um, when you feel like you're getting to the point where you can't take it or you're close to that point, begin reaching out then and there. Don't wait till it's just so terrible that you can't stand it. So be a little bit proactive in thinking about, well, where else can I go? Who else can I talk to? What other labs may be interested? Um, and I think a good timing of that is if you've tried to remedy it with your current PI and it's just not working, those are signs you need to get out. If the PI has agreed to work on certain things and they keep saying it, but nothing's happened, look for the other lab when you see it, right? Like don't just wait for them to get their act together. Look, and then hopefully in a perfect world, you'll be able to find a match. And that's important because PIs can have all kinds of projects, but money is key and funding may not always be available. Sometimes you're writing a grant, you're not going to get the grant until 9 months, a year later. They may have some money that they have this minute and it's going to be used up. And if they don't, or it's going to be wasted if they don't use it up. So like timing really is key. So ask before things get too bad. So hopefully you'll be able to minimize the gap.
And just to add to that too, if you have advocates and supporters there too, like talk to them. If you're in a graduate program where the program has organization and support that can really help either give you ideas of other mentors to talk to, They could be sort of mediators if there's some form of conflict. Definitely reach out there. I've have known of circumstances where individuals have had to change labs, but they went about it in a very organized way where they talked within the program support, really asked those hard questions to their next prospective mentor, where they've asked, like, is there suitable funding? Like, what project can I work on? And they've asked those questions for their professional development and had their situation really lined up before changing labs. So definitely like finding that support, I think, is key.
There's a question about seeing how to kind of share this with other labs in the department. Do we offer any form of guidance or materials on mentoring? I'd say the short answer is no. There are no kind of consolidated things, to my knowledge, that exist in my department. But I think it'd be nice if it were there. Everything is very much segmented where each PI kind of does their own thing. I think, though, maybe by program, I think you have more ability to have things be somewhat shared because there's, one overarching department where all the students are in, despite their individual departments. So I think looking at graduate programs, their philosophy to mentorship should be upfront. It should be on their website, like what they want out of mentors. There should be also like a faculty page for prospective people that want to be in the program, and their expectations on what the requirements are to be involved as a PI should be clearly stated. If they're not stated, inquire. And if there's no clear answer that comes so quickly, that's kind of a red flag, because some programs just want really good scientists, right? Who do all this best, amazing work, but not necessarily are thinking about the welfare of their students. A good graduate program thinks about their students and therefore wants PIs who also think about that because they want the students to succeed. Departments are kind of tricky because every department does it different. And the department chair kind of leads everything, right? And makes the priorities of importance. So I guess the best way to go about it would be to get your department chair to buy in to the need for this, and then buy in with money if necessary, and buy in with how these efforts are evaluated during like promotions and things of that nature, and faculty evaluations. If it matters to the department, it should count equally mentorship as getting a grant, something like that.
I can read the next question, but it's not for me. So as the BIPOC PI, how do you address microaggressions towards you from lab members/students? You're sure they are unaware they're doing it, but how to talk about it with them so they don't feel you're angry/attacking them, but see what you're saying as guidance.
This is something that takes time. I had a very challenging person that I was mentoring, and I felt like this person was always just challenging me on everything, like literally everything. Lab notebook. Well, why do I have to do it this way? Oh, because of this. I try to get the benefit of the doubt. And I try to give examples as to why it's important so there can be consistency across, future lab members, also for yourself looking back. Or when I sent out that Christmas gift to everyone, well, why do you need my address? Well, I already have your address. I'm just being polite so something is coming. And if you don't want it, you can opt out. They're just very hard to mentor. When I talk about papers and make comments, they'll never integrate everything. And it turned out they did not value me as a PI. They did not see me as a leader. And I was especially clear because for collaborators, they had the utmost respect, were very accommodating to everything they said. And so I tried my best to remedy that. I've had conversations, like very open, very honest, like, this is what I'm thinking, but maybe I'm wrong, how can I make this better for you? Or why are you concerned about my perspective on this? I try to talk about it. In the end, for a lot of reasons, it just didn't work out. And when that happened, I thought it was best that this person left the lab so they could be free to find a mentorship that best fit their style, right? Maybe I was too much for them and they didn't want my input. I don't know. but I knew that having that person in the lab was kind of tainting the overall experience for everyone. It was setting a bad precedent for the values that I had. And I didn't want other people incoming to see that and think that was a standard that I wanted. And so we agreed it was time for that person to leave. I gave them a 4-month grace period. I gave them time to find another job, paid, for not coming into the lab to do their thing. And they've left. And the lab is a much happier place because of it. And I hope that person is also happy and living their best life as well.
Let's see. Other questions? Okay, I think we can all answer the next one. So I was wondering if any of you have any advice on how to make the most of their post-bac experience as a lab technician in a great lab environment before going to graduate/med school. I think really immerse yourself into the not only the lab itself, but if you can, the institution environments as a whole. So there are going to be a number of things experimentally, professionally, and about navigating science and navigating your career goals that you're going to learn within your lab space. But also while you're at that institution as a postbac, take advantage of the resources that are also available beyond that individual lab too. Most institutions have like a professional development and career office. Take advantage of the resources that come out of that. Oftentimes there will be a number of seminars regarding different career paths that will come from that. Just go to those seminars. Like most of them are over Zoom now. You can learn about different career paths and different things that exist that really at early stage coming out of undergrad, early grad school, I didn't know existed. So I recommend taking advantage of that. Really just ask people questions about what they're doing. If you can and have the chance, you might have the opportunity to really write a full like R1 grant, like a huge grant. But if there's a grant out that your PI at the time that's really writing, have an opportunity to read it, to really understand like what grants look like. So I encourage you to just really immerse yourself in the environment. Like definitely don't overburden yourself, but immerse yourself in the environment with the different opportunities that exist all throughout.
There's a really important question about international students who kind of often have these direct recruits without having the benefit of like rotating and stuff before joining a lab. And it can be much harder to kind of get a feel of it. I think this also applies to postdocs to some extent too, because they also don't have the benefit of rotating for a period of time before accepting a lab. If you can't meet the PI in person or visit the group before joining, we have a great benefit now of like a lot of virtual things where you can get that same feel. So I've interviewed people without meeting them, accepted them to the lab now, and I still look for that camaraderie, that kind of feel for how they fit within the group. Ask all the questions that we have discussed about, like advocate for yourself and see if that person's gonna buy into what you want your training to be. All those things can still occur. I would say make an extra emphasis to see how the feel of a lab is. Get a feeling for, do you have direct access to the PI? Are you going to only interact with the postdoc and never see the PI? What is their idea about timeline? Like, I would try to speak more to the current students in the PI's absence. So that way you can get some feeling of how the interactions will be since you can't physically visit in person. I know our time is running short. There's one last question in the Q&A about entrepreneurs or startup labs wanting to partner with research institutions for funding. I say go for it. Every PI wants some more money. I can guarantee you that. I'd say think about and be strategic with whom you partner and see like, does the research program align with your interests? And then kind of even further, think more broadly and see if you can find people who really share the core values of your startup, right? Think about how they treat their people, not just are they great scientists. And maybe you can find a really good team to work with that might not be the most famous group, but will be hardworking and wants their people to succeed.
I guess as we're coming to a close, we can sort of summarize our ideals as mentorship, our like plans as like mentors currently, like things like we aspire to do. Yeah, so for myself, both as a mentee and a mentor, like I feel like I've learned a lot from Deanna and like learned a lot of what I want for myself, to really see a whole individual and be able to tailor what they need for their training, and really gauging like at what level like people are and like being able to push them to like help them meet their next step and their next goals.
Andrew?
Yeah, so I guess coming from like an undergrad mentee perspective, just it's very important to not accept anything that, you know, any environment that's not conducive to your own development. It's a very important time for you to hone in on these skills and goals, and having someone that understands that and is willing to work with you it makes a whole world of a difference when it comes time to, after undergrad.
And I'd say for me, the things I try to keep in mind are the fact that I'm not perfect, I'm still growing. I reach out to my mentors, especially those that have had labs for 20, 30 years. And as our group is getting even bigger, how do I manage everyone? How do I give everyone equal access or really equitable access to me without burning myself out? And then I try to talk to my mentees and see, what else do you need from me? What areas am I lacking? And I just try to grow to be the best mentor I can be. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying to be, better than I was yesterday.
Thank y'all so much. This was a wonderful conversation, and we've learned so much. Literally, everyone on Twitter is talking about all the nuggets y'all dropped and how inspiring y'all are. So I want to thank you for coming to this event, and I want to thank our live captioners, our interpreter, and our conference sponsors. And if you missed any events or you want to rewatch this wonderful conversation, please go to our YouTube page and continue the conversation on Twitter at hashtag Black and Neuro Mentors, because we've got a lot to talk about. But thank y'all, and come to our events tomorrow for the rest of the week. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.